Wow, really awesome! Today I will study with you the spec of this 6 full-frame mirrorless camera to see which one is the king for the video filming. And I made this list for an easier comparisons, and I think it's pretty good. And I will put it in my Facebook, and you are welcome to download for reference. Here are the cameras for 4 major brands. That include the Nikon Z7, Z6, the Panasonic S1H, the Canon R5, R6, and the Sony A7s Mark III. Let's first take a look at the release date. The Nikon and Panasonic were in the 3rd quarter of last year, while the Canon and Sony are both newly released. The difference is almost a year. Is there any big difference about the quality? The Z6 and the S1H are 24mm pixels, the R6 is 20mm, both the R5 and Z7 are 45mm. And we can see that the R5 and Z7 are aimed at high-res still photography, while the A7s Mark III get only 12mm. And for sure, the A7s Mark III is mainly for video. Of course, all cameras here can achieve 4K. The S1H can make 6K. The Canon R5 is even more amazing that it makes 8K. The Nikons can only make 4K 30p and 2K 120p for slow motion. The S1H makes 6K in 24p, 4K for 60p and also 120p for 2K. The R5 again is very impressive of reaching 120 frames for 4K and still get 30 frames for 8K. Its little brother, the R6, is actually not bad, 60 frames for 4K and 2K for 120 frames. The A7s Mark IIIs make 4K 120 frames and a very strong 240 frames for 2K. Here I found that only the R5 and S1H could make DCI 4K. Actually, I don't understand. They are all using oversampling imaging method. Why don't provide DCI 4K? And frankly, the DCI and UHD to 4K are not so much different, and it will not affect whether they will become the king of this class. But in terms of spec, I think the R5 and the A7s Mark III gets a better performance in this aspect. And I think the A7s Mark III is more practical in reality. First of all, I think the 8K is not often required. In the 4K it makes 120 frames just like the R5, but the A7s Mark III can achieve a much higher 240 frames in 2K. Yes, 240 frames. The 3 cameras with 20 megapixels can achieve an ISO of 100,000 or 200,000 something. The Z7 can make 100,000, while the R5 can only achieve about 50,000. Of course, this is not difficult to understand as with the same size of the sensor. More pixels means that each pixel will be smaller in size, and that will sure affect the light sensitivity. And there's no doubt that the A7s Mark III, which can achieve an ISO of 400,000 something, wins here. And it can be inferred that the A7s Mark III will have a better low-light filming capabilities. Since all cameras here has got a larger than 4K sensors, they must use the oversampling imaging method. And by the way, the pixel-to-pixel method was applied for the 6K of the S1H and the same as the 8K image of the R5. The R6 is also oversampling. Actually, I did not expect that the A7s Mark III is also oversampling. At first, I thought that the A7s Mark III will use the more efficient pixel-to-pixel method, and I will explain in another episode that although the oversampling imaging methods theoretically will get a sharper image, of which is not easy judged by our naked eyes, the pixel-to-pixel is more efficient. The A7s Mark IIIs get a sensor of 4.2K width, and as a result, it must apply the oversampling method to produce a very good UHD image. The video encoding rate can of course reflect the video quality, and I found that all cameras here are doing very good. The Nikon 4K can do 144 megabits per second, the S1H 6K is 200, 4K is 400 which is quite high. The Canon R5 8K can produce 12-bit RAW. Ding! Why give it a ding? Because it's really amazing. Actually, the R5 almost does not need to provide continuous shooting function. Because once if you can accept the 16:9 aspect, then every single frame from the video is a 12-bit raw photo. Just unbelievable. The normal video format still gets more than 1000 megabits per second, and the normal DCI 4K video also gets 1880 megabits per second. Really breathtaking. Maybe the only downside is it is storage very much. The R6 is actually not bad. 4K 30p gets 340 megabits per second. The A7s Mark III's 4K 60p All Intra gets 600 megabits per second. It is of course a very high performance and the quality could be assured. Up to this moment, I think the A7s Mark III and the R5 are quite well matched on paper. Here I think the Nikon Z6, Z7 performs a bit worse for its 8-bit 420, which is quite difficult to meet the professional requirements, and for the video-oriented S1H. The internal 4K must then be 10-bit 422, while its 6K can achieve 10-bit 420, which is still quite good. Ding! I give the R5 ding again because it can do 12-bit raw internal recording, which is completely the spec of a movie camera. When it comes to 8K or 4K video, it is also 10-bit 422. The R6 is also 10-bit 422. At first I expect the R6 can get 6K RAW, but maybe Canon has another idea. Maybe it wants its two cameras cause significant difference, so the R6 does not get 6K RAW. Actually I prefer 6K RAW rather than 8K. The A7s Mark III is 10-bit 422 and it also gets RAW output, though the RAW is not internal recording. Nikon finally can get 4K 30p 10-bit 422 for external recording. The S1H 4K can achieve 10-bit 422 in 60p and also 5.9K RAW and 4K RAW. The 4K RAW from a 6K sensor must be cropped and the size roughly is equal to APS-C or Super 35 and is still very attractive. The R5 4K can achieve 10-bit 422 in 60p and it does not require any external recorder to get RAW. What can I say? The R6 4K 60p can achieve 10-bit 422, same as the A7s Mark III, but the A7s Mark III is even more powerful, that it can achieve a 16-bit 4.2K RAW output. What is the concept of 16-bit RAW? Theoretically, this spec is just similar as the Aria Laser. So now you only need to buy A7s Mark III plus an external recorder, maybe just one for 30,000 Hong Kong, something like that, plus a cable. Then you may get about the performance of an Aria Laser. Oh my god. Originally this is a factor that may affect who is the king, but it seems pointless now, since all the cameras came to exist 14 stops. Here I state also the bracket of 13.8 for the S1H. What does it mean? Because I found that someone has done a test and found that the view dynamic range of the S1H should be 30.8. And actually the data that the factory came a lot far away and still believable. And here the A7s Mark III's again give a very wonderful number of 15 plus. What does this mean? The benchmark Aria Laser claims it can achieve 14 plus. So the 15 plus must be better than a laser. Again, really awesome. But of course it is subject to a test to see if it is true. If you don't shoot RAW, it's better able to shoot log. Nikon only provides analog for external recording. This is understandable because the internal recording is only 8-bit 420, of which is not ideal for log shooting. Besides, all the rest cameras here get internal log recording. I often say that in professional filming, limited time recording is not a problem because it rarely shoots as long as 30 minutes per shot. So what kind of shootings may exist 30 minutes? I think maybe weddings, speeches, or performance, something like that. And if you really need long recording, may I suggest that it's better for you to choose another type of camera. Canon's limitations mean to protect the body from overheating. There is no overheating issue stated by the A7s Mark III, but it is not the case, and I will explain later. The Nikon Z7 gets 493, the Z6 gets 273. Except Panasonic, all other cameras here get face detection. The autofocus of the Lumix cameras has been criticized for a long time, and the Panasonic still insists on contrast detection. My opinion is, no matter how good of your image is, if your autofocus function cannot satisfy some of your users, especially those vloggers, then your market will be limited. I just don't know why they refuse to change. Here shows that the Canon has a very impressive 1053 points. Sony also gets 759 points, plus both are a very good response autofocus system. All cameras at least achieve 3mm. The S1H is the first to achieve 5mm, and the Canon R5 also gets 5mm. Sony is even more exaggerated to get 9mm. I'm just wondering regarding the effect, may it look like an optical viewfinder? Basically, except for Nikon, which only gets tilting screen, all other gets fully articulated. Actually, I think the fully articulated screen is the best for video filming. For Nikon, I can only say that the cameras are photo-oriented. I think for taking pictures, the tilting screen is good enough. This is a website for evaluating the performance of the camera's sensor. The Z7 scored a very high 99 marks. But is that 100 full mark? It seems some have exceeded 100 points. The Z6 got 95. They hasn't evaluated the S1H yet, so I used the 95 points S1 for reference. The remaining 3 are just too new, so I found some similar for reference. The 5DS has 86 points, the 1DX Mark III got 91, and the A7s Mark II has 85 points. It is easy to infer that all these cameras will easily exceed 90 points today. I add these items because all these cameras basically are warmer when filming video. No need to be very hot, but it may affect the stability. And from the list, I can see that only the S1H get an active cooling function. I don't know if it really matters for lacking this function, we have to test it, but from the spec alone, it seems the S1H get a bit of little advantage here. I really don't know why only the S1H got the waveform monitor. It's okay for those photo-oriented cameras, but how about the video-oriented A7s Mark III? For digital video today, both the waveform monitor and force color are very important for exposure. Or then you have to rent another monitor with this function when you need it. The price is just for reference, but I found that there are two cameras here are very cost effective. One is the Canon's R6, which is pretty good at $2,500 US, and the other is the Nikon Z6. If you want a hybrid camera able to take some beautiful photos and you don't intend to make very professional video, the $1,800 US is a good choice. Overheat issue is of course a very important factor. Seems no problem with the Z6 or the Z7, but unexpected is that external recording of the Z7 will overheat and stop after an hour. The S1H has an active cooling system, so there must be no problem. Canon confirmed that the 8K video recording can only be done for 20 minutes. Once again, I think the 20 minutes is not really a problem, because once you are shooting in 8K, it must be some decent productions, but just not long recording. However, I wonder if there is any accumulated overheating problem. For example, will it be overheated after many 10 minutes interval shooting? I haven't seen such tests yet, and I will try it if I get the camera. The R6 will overheat after 30 minutes. No overheating problem is stated for the A7s Mark III, but since it's using a 4.2K width sensors, it must use the oversampling image methods. Finally, the body still gets heat. Someone has tried at 4K 120p, you can only shoot for rough an hour. Again, I don't think this is really a problem, as it was happening in such extreme conditions. Or do you really want 120p 4K in 2 hours or even 3 hours? Are there any such big storage medium? Netflix profiles is not an absolute quality assessment, but good for reference. Up to this moment, only the S1H has got it for mirrorless camera. For Nikon, I think it is quite impossible since their video specs are really quite low. And how about the R5, R6 and the A7s Mark III? I think the chance is good, but there is dark surge with the overheating problem since the stability is also very important. Of course, right now this is just a hypothesis. Maybe just after testing, they found no problem at all. I really hope they can succeed, then we can have more choices, not only for the budget, but also for the flexibility of filming. So finally, who's the king for video filming? Purely on the spec, I would think that the third place goes to the S1H, and unless the R6 can get 6K RAW, I think the stability of the S1H is a bit better. As for the champion, I think it must be a battle between the R5 and the A7s Mark III. The R5 can capture 8K RAW, which is very impressive, and the A7s Mark III requires an external device for 4K RAW. It seems the R5 is better, but I wonder, do we really often need 8K resolution? Then may I ask what's the 8K spec for? I think there are two. The first one is the computer special effect, since the 8K resolutions really help. The second is the multi-screen split video wall. If you want each split screen to maintain high resolutions, sure, a 8K must be better than 4K or 2K. Frankly, I really think that not so many productions release 8K processings. And on the other hand, if you take into account the ability to shoot in low light conditions, I believe the A7s Mark III will be slightly better. Of course, I'm not saying the R5 is bad. Actually, it does fulfill two excellent performances. That is, in addition to shooting very beautiful videos, the R5 also gets super resolution photos. But after all, if I have to pick the king of a full-frame mirrorless camera for video filming, I will still go to the A7s Mark III.